Hi everyone, a very good afternoon. And on behalf of World Bank Group Malaysia and CFA Society Malaysia, welcome to today's panel roundtable discussion on sustainable and responsible investment taxonomy. I'm Caroline, the Executive Director of CFA Society Malaysia. Now, just to do a quick run through on a few housekeeping items, as you can see in the slides earlier. Today's session is recorded, so it will be made available on CFA Society Malaysia's YouTube channel and also CFA Institute ARX platform. As you may have also noticed, we have shared the link or QR code to the meet.ps platform that will be used for survey polls. And also you can drop your questions into the same platform as well. So please do participate to provide your feedback, as the panel's discussion and the survey feedback from today will form the base to our feedback to Securities Commission Malaysia for its consultation paper on the taxonomy. Right. Now, to welcome everyone today those who are joining today and those who have been joining the World Bank Group Malaysia and CFA Society Malaysia's SRI series that was launched since last year. Today's panel is the fifth part to the SRI series. Last year, we have successfully organized 4-part webinars, which focus on different key themes of SRI, including regional ESG trends and outlook, integration of ESG factors into investment decision-making, and impact investing. We have also provided the link where you may access the playback of this session from CFA Society Malaysia's website. Now, to kick off the series for 2022, we will be spotlighting on the topic of taxonomy for sustainable investing. Now, I know while the mention of taxonomy may give the impression that it may be somewhat a very dry discussion, but it is also a very vital fundamental block to facilitate consistent classification of what can be considered as green, socially responsible, or in transition. And these are actually very important to establish common understanding of investment products and services. Hence, Securities Commission Malaysia's issuance for a public consultation paper on a principle-based SRI taxonomy is much anticipated by capital market players here. Now, we would like to thank Securities Commission Malaysia, Puan Salma and her team for coming together in today's session and for giving us an opportunity to play an important role to provide feedbacks for Securities Commission's consideration to this very important piece of building block, and also to the esteemed panel and moderator who join us from here, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, and also Europe to share their perspective to the topic. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Chong Jin Yong, who's the president of CFA Society Malaysia, to give his welcome note. Jin Yong.
Thanks, Caroline. I'd like to wish a very good afternoon and welcome to everyone present here today. Puan Salma, the Executive Director of Market Development at SC Malaysia, to our roundtable panel members, Mr. Brian Hogue from Deloitte IPAC, to Daniel Rosas, the Europe Regional Coordinator, UNEP Finance Initiative, to Sri Che San from Nomura Research Institute. Che San is also a fellow CFA charter holder. Ms. Tok Sin Ying, Head of Southeast Asia at the Carbon Trust, Singapore. And of course, our moderator for today, Dr. Adam Ng from WWF Malaysia. Thank you, and we are very grateful to each of our esteemed panelists here for sparing your time today to share and contribute your views and also feedback in this important aspect of sustainable finance. Now, the need for capital markets to facilitate financing for sustainable development, which is crucial to meeting the UN SDG, is undeniable. However, on the journey to achieving these important goals, there is a very real risk that for market participants may incorrectly identify or classify economic activities, whether unknowingly or otherwise, to be able to qualify for sustainable financing. So this is where taxonomy plays a very important role, as it provides clarity and becomes a guide to the industry to ensure consistency and standardization to the definitions within the SRI space. So this benefits all stakeholders, be it borrowers, issuers, investors, intermediaries, and even the information providers. It is noteworthy that SC has taken a crucial step to release this public consultation paper on the SRI taxonomy, and CFA Society Malaysia is glad to be able to facilitate this event in conjunction with our partners as part of the industry's contribution towards this important component of the SRI roadmap. Once again, a big thanks to our esteemed panelists, and let's have a productive session. Back to you, Caroline.
Thanks, Jin Yong. Now, without further ado, of course, we would like to hear from Securities Commission as well. So I'd like to invite Puan Salma to share her perspective, and also on behalf of Securities Commission Malaysia on the consultation paper that was issued in December. Puan Salma, may I invite you?
Thank you, Caroline. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just start by thanking CFA Society and the World Bank Group, Chong Jin Yoon, Muhammad Razani Osman, and the organizing team and Caroline for the invitation to kick off CFA's first SRI series for 2022, focusing on taxonomy and of sustainable investing. Now, sustainability and transitioning to a low carbon economy, as we see, is increasingly driving the development initiatives of many economies. A significant number of countries are setting clear climate targets within the next decade. This growing interest is creating greater investment opportunities for investors and companies, linked with a common goal of ensuring inclusive economic growth. Policymakers, including the Securities Commission Malaysia, acknowledge that to sustain and build upon this interest requires the financial system and capital markets to step up and provide wider range of financing and investment solutions. To ensure that the demand and needs of the various parts are sufficiently met, a clear common language of what is sustainable is needed. We recognize that a common taxonomy will enhance the standardization and comparability of sustainable assets, including resulting in greater development and acceptance of this asset class. Premise on this outcome, the SC embarked on developing a principle-based SRI taxonomy in 2021 to better support informed investment decision-making, make more efficient fundraising, and more importantly, identify economic activities that are aligned with environment, social, and sustainability objectives. In doing this, we want to address the risks of greenwashing by providing a reference guide for issuers, intermediaries, and investors to undertake sustainable economic activities. A principle-based approach was adopted in recognition that capital market constituents are currently at different stages of their sustainability journey. The SRI taxonomy, which is a key recommendation of the SRI roadmap of the Malaysian Capital Market, was a collaborative initiative with an industry working group comprising World Bank as our lead technical expert and representatives from Bursa Malaysia, fund management companies, and investment banks, in consultation with other important stakeholders, including asset owners and several sustainable finance specialists. Ladies and gentlemen, the SRI taxonomy recognizes that the Malaysian capital market has an important role to facilitate transition finance that is inclusive of the broader economy. This taxonomy provides guiding principles in financing a credible transition to enable more companies to leverage on market-based instruments to meet their transition finance needs. Equally important to the SC, this development runs parallel with our efforts to further strengthen Malaysia's proposition as a regional SRI center. As such, the SRI taxonomy took into consideration other widely used taxonomy in effort to promote greater harmonization of standards. The working group had ensured that the document was aligned with Bank Negara Malaysia's climate change and principle-based taxonomy, and the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance version 1 to ensure that we strengthen consistency. I, at this stage, would like to briefly touch on the scope and components of the SRI taxonomy, which comprises 3 components, namely the environmental, social, and sustainability components. For the environmental component, the objectives are aligned with BNM's CCPT and the ASEAN taxonomy to ensure harmonization in defining what encompasses green activities in Malaysia. Meanwhile, the social component makes the capital market SRI taxonomy unique from other taxonomies within this region. You will notice that it contains 2 social objectives. Firstly, promoting overall social benefits and well-being, and secondly, enhancing conduct towards stakeholders. Recent events relating to social issues domestically further enhances the importance of including a social component in the SRI taxonomy. Indeed, this is timely to be a catalyst for discussions on how the Malaysian capital market can play its role in elevating social standards. The social component provides broad-based guiding principles for the Malaysian capital market constituents in managing social risks, as well as unlocking opportunities to enhance social standards. An economic activity or company that supports both environmental and social components can be considered sustainable. This is an important consideration to promote the linkages between the environmental and social objectives of the economic activity. The final component, sustainability, is intended to address this area. The 3-month consultation process that the SC has embarked on has provided a wide range of feedback, cementing our intention to ensure the taxonomy's usability. I am certain today's conversation will be another important step towards this, given the depth of experience and expertise of the panel under the guidance of our strong moderator. I look forward to what I am certain will be an engaging discussion by our experts and the subsequent discussion as part of our effort to assist the industry in navigating the SRI taxonomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Salma. May I also invite all the audience to log on to the platform, the survey panel poll platform. It's meet.ps/SRI, as you can see on our share screen. May I then call on to Dr. Adam to then take on the next session?
Sure. Thank you very much, Caroline. Again, once again, thank you, the SC, particularly Salma, and our CFA President, Jing Yong, and our collaborator, World Bank, as well as all participants who have kindly sacrificed your lunch for having this food for thought. We understand that this will be held in the lunchtime until 2:30, so if you can bear with us, or while you can have your lunch during this Zoom webinar. So we have the first question here. I hope you have logged into the meet.ps/SRI. This is just to warm up. There's no reward here. Definitely CFA say will not be awarding the CFA marks here. But yeah, just to let us see, this is the first question. So how would capital market participants use the SRI taxonomy? We have only 7 attendees voted. Maybe give a bit of time. So it seems to be a racing competition that I think investment due diligence to identify SRI opportunities as well as disclosure and reporting seems to be leading the pack. It's maybe the 2 main application of the SRI taxonomy. All right, so we take it as good now. We have 19 attendees. Maybe you can flesh it out again later after we've run through the 3 questions. So for this particular question, I think it's safe to assume that the 2 most important use cases would be investment due diligence and also disclosure and reporting. Right. All right. Caroline, can we move to the next question? Oh, so there are already people answering this. So this will be, what are the following factors that would contribute to a wider adoption of the taxonomy? We have risks, opportunities, market pressure and expectation, as well as regulatory pressure. Again, it appears that regulatory pressure, probably because of Puan Salma opening remarks, there's such, I would say pressure, but expectation, which is a positive expectation. But it's also good to see that fellow participants also identify premium and opportunities as also a key factor that would drive wider adoption apart from regulatory expectation. Yeah. All right, if we can move to the 3rd one. So this is more like the ask from you guys as to what kind of policy and regulation that will support the SRI taxonomy further in achieving this objective. So we have the likes of having additional guidance, mandatory disclosure, flexibility of the FIs to apply your own framework, incentive or disincentive, as well as having a national governmental level taxonomy that is applicable to all high-risk sectors. So interestingly, I think the national taxonomy is gaining a lot of traction. I think it makes a lot of sense because we do want to see that taxonomy is not just applicable to both the banking or asset management or insurance sector, but you want the entire corporate economy to also be aligned to this kind of taxonomy classification system. Apart from that, also I think we are seeing traction in mandatory disclosure. So this is interesting. I think from the audience, it seems that there's an expectation that to level the playing field, all FI should be mandated to disclose their alignment to the taxonomy. So this is something quite positive. Not much of incentive or disincentive is expected. Yep, so we could summarize this, yeah, the national taxonomy and as well as a mandatory disclosure. Okay, I think we can share this result maybe towards the end, just to flash it again in case there are to welcome other attendees to include this. Okay. Yep. Yeah, if I can move on to the next section now, before we actually begin the real action panel discussion, I would like to just invite the 4 panelists to introduce themselves. We have 4 esteemed panelists. Maybe we start with an alphabetical order. Brian, if you could share a bit of your role in your current organization, what is your experience in sustainability, and also how do you think taxonomy in general can be used from the perspective of fund managers, corporation, financial intermediaries, and service providers? That would be good. Brian.
No problem. Thanks, Adam. So good afternoon. This is Brian Ho, and I'm a partner at Deloitte and leading the climate and sustainability assurance for APAC and Southeast Asia. So really nice to meet you. So I believe that I mean Deloitte is well known. I mean it's familiar with you that we are traditional financial auditing firm, but we also do other different types of services. So I've been working in the sustainability for around 20 years in my career. And I believe that there are more and more discussions regarding sustainable finance. And of course, there's a potential risk on greenwashing as well. That's why it's really excited to see the taxonomy being developed by the SC in Malaysia, which it can help us to have a better definitions on what means, I mean, how companies and investors can claim what means by green and climate friendly. And it can also help us to make truly green activities more visible and also attractive to investors as well. And I believe because my past experience mainly come from working with different types of companies, especially listed companies, on their sustainability journey. So I believe that the major purpose or how we can use it is mainly focusing on disclosing relevant information to the stakeholders, especially investors are important. And I saw the result from the poll that a lot of our audience also agree that mandatory reporting is also very important. So in such cases, how companies should set up their own mechanism in order to monitor and disclose on a timely manner, and also respond back to the stakeholders is also very important, and also a good basis for using the taxonomy. So I'll just stop here, and we look forward to have more discussion with you.
Thank you, Brian. Can I invite Chistan from Nomura?
Hello, can you see me? Can
Yes,
you
we
hear
can.
me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me today. My name is Chie Mitsui, in Japanese Mitsui Chie, a researcher of Remedial Research Institute in Japan. I have been making research and analysis for the issue of the asset management industry, especially corporate disclosure and ESG topics. At the same time, organizing some investors' study and opinion group about those topics. One of them is CFA Society Japan. Now I'm a chair of Advocacy Committee of CFA Society Japan. So since 2018, the European Commission started to introduce sustainable finance. I have been watching it and discussing several issues in the Japanese investor group, and sent a comment letter for public consultation of taxonomy, EU taxonomy. Initially, we are carefully thinking about whether it is helpful for investor or not. In 2019, the first consultation of taxonomy, it was an actually interim version. In our group, people said there is a risk of overfunding or discourage innovation, for example, like a carbon capture technology. But later we knew many people said the same points, and gradually taxonomy was updating. So now I think we are satisfied because the European Commission always asks investors' opinions. So now we think generally taxonomy is good interface to take a consensus on what we are looking for and what it means green, or our purpose of the society wants to achieve. So of course, still it is not perfect, but it is helpful. I think rather how to use it is an issue. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chisan. Yes, perfection is the enemy of good. It's always good to start with something good enough, and I suppose that is a key starting point. Can I invite Daniel from UNEPFI?
Hi, thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. So myself, I'm Daniel Bozas. I'm the European Regional Coordinator at UNEPFI. And as you may know, UNEPFI is a joint initiative between the United Nations Environment Programme and the global financial sector to foster sustainable finance and sustainable development. So my key role is mainly to engage with European institutions to promote our principles, our alliances, and our views, and let's say commitments to sustainability that the institutions can undertake, as well as taking care of regulatory approaches within the EU. And as I believe Chi has already very well introduced, in Europe we have seen a very, very concrete and a very, let's say, continuously advancing regulatory framework on sustainability that is, of course, based on a taxonomy. And the EU taxonomy, you probably have heard about it, is also covering whole areas, not only on investment, but also on disclosures and all of the ranges of the economy, from the corporates, the banks that finance it, the insurance that insures them, and as well the asset managers, asset owners, and the investors behind. So that is a bit of the core elements. And regarding my experience, I've been engaging with the European regulators for over 5 years. I was before a policy advisor at the European Banking Federation, so advising the European banks also how to engage on the sustainability discussions also since the very beginning. And in terms of usability, I believe, as I said, also from the European perspective, I think a taxonomy needs to be usable from the perspective of all of the market players, as well as the real economy, in order to make credible steps towards sustainability transition. I think that's the core element. How it should be usable, well, that depends as well on the specific context in which it's inserted. And I think that's why approaches happening at the regional level are very, very interesting. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, harmonization is of course key to level the playing field so that the market becomes more competitive and of course fair from a regulatory policy making standpoint. Thank you so much. Ting, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you, Adam. So my name is Sing Ying. I'm the head of Southeast Asia here at the Carbon Trust out of Singapore. The Carbon Trust, we are a specialist organization that supports a full range of activities from governments, corporates to financial institutions as they chart this course towards net zero. We've been doing that for over 20 years now, and the Singapore office, looking across the whole of Southeast Asia, we see a lot more intersections between the need to talk about financial regulatory mechanisms to connect with the real economy changes that we need to see here in Southeast Asia. As for myself, my experience in sustainability, I started my career in banking and shifted towards looking at climate change, very specifically in the US, China, and Southeast Asia, both as a grant maker from a philanthropic perspective, but also as an ESG consultant supporting international institutional investors who would like to see the large Asian listed utilities and large Asian banks support the type of transition that we need to see here in Asia. I don't think I have anything extra to add on the usability of taxonomy. I think I agree with many of my fellow panelists here today.
Yeah, thank you, Sing. We have 1 hour for you guys to express your thoughts. So I just want to reiterate that we are really privileged to have with us all 4 esteemed speakers and experts that is bringing in various experience, and also that this is a somewhat closed door session. It's not meant for public, so it's by invitation. And we are also very privileged to have the support from all the participants joining us, and thank you so much. As you know, today's roundtable is not a typical webinar. We have actually designed the questions because these questions are linked to the SRI taxonomy of the SC. And just a kind of heads up to all of you. The question might be a bit more technical because they are very specific, specifically linked to the taxonomy. But we will have some slight placeholder in terms of putting up the topic so that it can help to navigate the discussion better, and also for some visualization. So before we go into the technical questions, there will be 8 technical questions that will be addressed by all our fellow panelists. Maybe just an icebreaker. Maybe Daniel can start first, given your experience in the UNEPFI and the EU context, just to share your thoughts on some key building blocks and success factors for sustainable taxonomy, taking into account that EU has been among the earlier so-called region to come up with this concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to do it, let's say, from a global perspective, and also focusing on the European side. I mean, first of all, I would like to say that I read with interest the consultation from the SC, and I was very intrigued to see, there's a principle-based approach, but it's also planned to be expanded. And I would like to say that you have a very good chance to make this a successful taxonomy and to make sure that everything comes together. In terms of principles, I think all taxonomies are principle-based in the beginning. I mean, you can see at the European level that you have a taxonomy that has core principles in terms of that it needs to substantially contribute to environmental objectives, do no significant harm to the others, as well as have social considerations in the minimum safeguards. But what I see here is like you have already integrated, let's say, the environmental and the social part in a very important way. So that alignment and that specific approach in that you put together all of these elements is very critical. Then with regards to key building blocks and success with regards to building a sustainable taxonomy, I think we have seen different documents popping up at the global level that provide guidance, provide ideas on how to do this and how to go forward. And there's different approaches. I mean, the BCBS has published a paper, IPSF and UNDESA, they have published another. And what I would like to do is really to combine a bit all of these ideas together with what we have seen at the European level to make sense out of all of this. So from what I've seen, it's like if a taxonomy wants to be successful, it needs to be, first of all, science-based. You need to have concrete, scientifically based targets that you would like to reach, either as a country, as a region, or as a specific section of the industry, to make sure that you are aiming towards a goal that is not a randomly chosen goal. It is science-based. The second element is it needs to be usable and interoperable. We were briefly touching upon that in the introduction. It needs to be usable for the whole financial industry. While I understand that this taxonomy is already aligned between the Bank Negara and let's say the ASEAN taxonomy, which let's say I'm not an expert on, but I understand that this is very important because if the central bank is regulating specific entities that need to comply with those specific areas of the taxonomy, the interoperability between the different sectors needs to be critical, because you need to realize that the taxonomy is not an outcome, but it's rather a tool that you can use to help direct the flows towards the activities that help you to reach those scientifically based goals that you have already set in the beginning. So in that regards, that interoperability is critical because you need to flow from the taxonomies to the tools, the products and the labels through very concrete approaches. So I think one key approach, at least from the European side that I have seen that is good to realize is the substantial contribution versus do no significant harm. That you need to be able to have positive impact while minimizing negative impact, which is an approach that at UNPFI we very much, let's say, encourage in terms of understanding where your impacts are. It's not all about identifying risk, but also to having positive impacts. Then it should be transparent and verifiable. So while it is science-based and interoperable, you need to understand as well how this makes sense to the market. And that verification needs to happen as well, connected to the possible disclosures that should be connected to the taxonomy. So that is the next point. So disclosures and data are critical. Once you have this common language, you will have a specific approach on how to reach scientifically based goals. But at the same time, those goals may shift over time given the nature of science, and specifically climate science. So you need to make sure that you have a good data collection that matches those goals, and that is adjustable in a way that allows you to reach, let's say, a moving goal post that is, let's say, decarbonization to net zero by 2050. And then finally, I think that the last element of a successful taxonomy is the successful integration of E, S, and G considerations. I believe it is already great that in this principle-based taxonomy, there are already environmental and social objectives connected. Of course, the matter is now to understand how to go forward from them, because normally environmental activities are focused to reducing negative impacts, while social activities, they can be also aimed at reducing those negative impacts, but also to especially promote positive impacts. And I will stop here. I think, if you allow me, I think that's a good introduction. And if we're happy to discuss it more length during the panel. So
thanks, Daniel. I think you have nicely summed up. If I could just recap some of your points, it's key to have science-based, and this is a tool, not just an outcome. Taxonomy should be interoperability, not just within different regions, but also different segments of the industry, fund manager, banking, and also the corporate economy. I think UNEPFI is also very strong as an advocate on positive impact as well as minimizing negative impact. And taxonomy should be as clear as possible in terms of having that degree of transparency, verifiable by third party, so that to avoid greenwashing. And it's also key for taxonomy to be integrating, as you say, E, S, and G, and also how this can move towards a moving carbon, moving goalposts, right? So different decarbonization pathway, different nature positive targets So I think that's very good summary. I mean, as an overview of a key building block for the taxonomy. I have also singing, which who would like to share some of the hands-on experience on the ground. I think she will be sharing an emerging market example to give some flavor of how does successful taxonomy, or at least from a building blocks perspective, how it looks like. So over to you, Singing. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And I think this kind of does flow through from what Daniel was sharing before, right? So there's a lot of moving parts of how to really integrate a taxonomy into something that is usable and something that is feasible for how the real economy can transition. And so today I'm just going to share very quickly some of the experiences that Carbon Trust has had as well as supporting the South African taxonomy process. And this is very specific to what we have learned and continue to learn in terms of the process to build this buy-in so that we can ensure that type of, multiple layers of interoperability for the taxonomy. So today I would very quickly talk about the buy-in process that we've used or we've worked together in South Africa with all our other partners in the early stage currently, as we are planning to already launch taxonomy within a month. And then what we understand to be the process that will still continue, because this is going to be a long-term process of integrating the taxonomy into the economy. So for the very first part, when we built the buy-in process, I think there is a lot of even pre-drafting of the taxonomy, that level of stakeholder consultation. And I wanted to go to the next slide to kind of to demonstrate why that was kind of important for us, because the taxonomy has multiple different vectors to it, right? So it needs to cover the range of economic sectors. It needs to cover an understanding of what the technical screening criteria is in each of these different sectors, and also understand how each of these technical screening criteria interacts with the environmental objectives that are going to be put inside this green finance taxonomy. So you can see that the different layers and the different vectors that are implicated means that we cannot achieve everything at one go, right? So I think one of the things that we had to do in South Africa was to then talk about what is it that we have to work on right now first, at the very first step, and what is it that we can build in later. So if we take a little look at the right hand, the little cube that we've developed there, basically for now, the South African green taxonomy, we've defined what green is, but we know that in the near future, we have to talk about what is non-compatible with green. We also know that we have to talk about what social and just transition looks like. But then on top of all of that, we have built the minimum environmental and social safeguards, right? So I think what was important in this very early part of the buy-in process was to identify what we need to work on first, and also give market players a view of where the rest would be coming on the next. So if you go back to the previous slide, just want to talk a little bit of what we have been doing in terms of this buy-in process as we built the taxonomy, and we're going to launch it soon. Part of that is to develop these pilot testing case studies that would then help to send the market signals that can bolster confidence across all the different players. So we've identified a range of different key players that would use the taxonomy and create some use cases, very specific use cases for them, and then help them go through this pilot testing phase. And through this pilot testing phase, there are multiple purposes. One is so that the key market players, there are some representative key market players that can then create some knowledge products that will then be shared widely across the marketplace. But in this process, we are also developing champions, right, to be able to say how this has been usable for them. So then lastly, as even when the taxonomy has been launched, we understand that this is an ongoing process. So there is still a process of deepening how the taxonomy can be used inside the economy, as well as the regulatory mechanisms, right? So the Treasury Department in South Africa, they're not the only player in the financial regulatory mechanisms. So there's going to be a need to try to figure out how this flows through everywhere else. I think this is quite similar in the Malaysian context. It's not just the Securities Commission, but there's also listing rules. There's also other types of rules that need to kind of come in place as a totality. As I mentioned, the knowledge products that come from the pilots in phase 2 are then going to have to be open access, create them as open access tools, and that allows for even further deepening in the marketplace. So that's kind of some of the learnings that we've had in terms of the buying process that has been needed as part of building a successfully green finance taxonomy. If you go to the third slide, just a very quick flash of some of the knowledge products that had already been in place and public materials. This continues to build, right, over time. So we really do hope that some of these sharings can be helpful or supportive of future deepening work with the SRI taxonomy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ying. Yeah, it's interesting to see the approach that you have taken in terms of harnessing champions, taking a pilot approach, as well as coming up with open access knowledge product as shown in this screen. I'm also very fascinated to see the so-called summary that you have done in a Rubik's Cube format, and your emphasis of taking a whole of industry approach, that there are different stakeholders within, not just the regulatory policy making, but also at the wider industry and corporate economy level. All right, without further ado, I shall now move on to the panel discussion. The first topic will be on the principle-based taxonomy. This is the approach that the Securities Commission, with the support of the Industry Working Group, have taken. Primarily, it is to take into account the state of readiness of the Malaysian capital market, and is to aim to provide a common guiding principle on the classification of economic activities to support sustainable investment. Right? So this is the start, where you have this principle-based approach, which will then pave the way for future introduction of more granular and technical guidance. So I would like to maybe go back to Daniel again, on your views on what do you think about this approach, and how should the SRI taxonomy move forward going forward?
Yeah, thanks. I believe I touched briefly upon this with regards to principle-based versus going a bit more towards, let's say, the concrete technical screening criteria and how this should go forward. I mean, I can tell you in Europe, even when you have, let's say, the overall principles are substantial contribution, no significant harm, and minimum safeguards, and how they're implemented is by very concrete, specific technical screening criteria and very specific thresholds that activities need to meet. But when you look at those thresholds and those activities a bit more concretely, there are different approaches within them. So you may have some substantial contribution. For example, with solar panels, there's just the production of electricity from solar panels is included as a whole, as a substantial contribution element. So that is principle-based to say that renewable energy is sustainable. So that is already, let's say, within the principles, and then other activities that do not match, let's say, that a specific level of complexity, or that they are going towards different thresholds, they are more concretely defined to say that cement production needs to reach a specific threshold of tons of CO2 per production of cement that needs to fit there. And I think that when you already start thinking about economic activities, and you start defining them, you will go towards the challenge of how to define them with industry codes and how to go to which level of depth, etc. So it is critical to see that you can do this in a way that makes sense towards the economy of the country, and that you can go to a level of depth that is also relevant, because the economic makeup of Southeast Asia and of a specific country, in this case Malaysia, may differ a lot from what has already been defined, and you need to target it towards those specific activities and make sure that the financial sector can support those activities. So it's always a matter of balancing between how those principles should be defined and what is the concrete outcome that you want to extract out of it. So I think starting from principle base is very useful, and then going towards the more level of complexity allows you to have a grade of flexibility, a degree of flexibility that probably in Europe was not there since the beginning, but because the market asks were very, very high. So in that regard, I think it is always a balancing act. I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Daniel. See, do you have any thoughts on this?
Thank you. I think I agree. The principle-based approach is a first step that that will have to deepen over time, and that's, as I mentioned, our own experiences that determining takes that time and that stakeholder approach. One of the things I wanted to take a look was even with the principles approach, I think there were some identified objectives, right? And the principles kind of flow through the environmental objectives. And the comprehensiveness of the environmental objectives is something that then also needs to be encoded, I guess, in the taxonomy. So for example, I think the carbon neutrality goal is in there, but I think Malaysia has also committed to some of the deforestation goal, which is very linked to the biodiversity environmental objective that is indicated in the taxonomy. Right? So, but there's also, air quality, clean water goals, things like that. They're all part of this biodiversity definition that's inside the taxonomy, which I think would be helpful to have more clearer, like national goals tied into this whole piece. And then from the international investors' perspective, I think that as they themselves sign up to a lot of their portfolio carbon footprinting goals, it therefore becomes important for them to understand beyond just the principles how using a taxonomy can actually help them move slowly towards those goals, right? So kind of understanding where we expect the green investment fund flows to come into Malaysia, and to therefore see, where the compatibility issues might come from, what to focus on next to achieve that level of compatibility, so that international investors see some usability. So for example, for us, when we were helping the South African taxonomy develop, it was very clear to us that EU DFI money is still very important. So following the trends of discussions over there to ensure that the taxonomy will eventually kind of dovetail was very important. So.
Yeah, thank you. If I can summarize the feedback here, I think a balancing act is important. Starting with principle base is a good starting point, but eventually we'll have to have enough information and clarity so that it boosts investor confidence, mainly because there's that interoperability and also compatibility across different markets and for product innovation and so on. Thank you both. Brian, I have one question for you. This is on the second topic, which is on technical assessment of economic activities. So as the classification system currently as it stands, it is qualitative in nature. The taxonomy also recommend a company to perform additional technical assessment on economic activities. Right? So on this point, how granular should the screening criteria should be? And also take into account that there will be a plus tier taxonomy that the SC will be developing. How detailed should it be in terms of project level, economic activity level, or sector portfolio level, or should it remain at the high level of this sectorial level?
Yeah, I think a kind of we need to provide details. For example, a full list of some additional technical screening criteria for those economic activities which can substantially contribute to climate change mitigation or adaptation. For example, like including the assessment of those significant harm to the environmental objectives are pretty essentials for that. And when we talk about the plus-tier taxonomy, I think it will be always good to look at those industries that are based on, for example, like the current trend of investment, and also the national agenda of Malaysia, and also the potential impact of those on environmental and social issues. So it means that, I mean, for each sector, it will be good to understand the nature and activities of business, economic activities to assess the impact of all aspects. So whether it is direct or indirect, downstream or upstream. So in the end, the whole point of those will be bring the best outcome of the economic activities to the environment and also society. So I mean, any impact on that should be put under the consideration as well. So yeah, so this is what I think we should how to look at that.
Sure, thank you, Brian. I note that impact is also not easy to assess, especially if it's indirect impact. Right? So hopefully over time, with more disclosure and measurement and tools, this will be made easier for the alignment process to be done. Then you could also jump in here a bit to share your thoughts on this technical assessment and how should it look like going forward.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with regards to the specific, let's say, concrete developments on how this should be done, I mean, there's not an easy way to, let's say, to understand how this benefit can happen. No, so the technical assessment, you can do it in different levels. You can do it very granular to the level of, understanding what is the threshold that you need to meet to reach a specific environmental target, or how you want to overall define specific elements. I mean, it can be just an area where you want to stop financing some elements, and you decide in the taxonomy that some specific activities cannot transition, and you just need not to consider them as such. So you can take the approach of going towards the decarbonization, going towards the thresholds, going towards, let's say, taking away some specific activities. But of course, I'm probably taking here a bit of the bias of the, let's say, the European approach that has been defined at the activity level, and you may benefit, let's say, from an overall sector decarbonization target that can be set, and then, if needed, going towards the activities to understand, okay, well, maybe within power generation, we need to look more closely towards gas, nuclear, and maybe oil, rather than going towards solar or, let's say, defining specific contribution of solar, and just going towards understanding where should be the level of performance of those specific activities. So it is a matter of understanding where you need to, let's say, move, and then choosing the level of that movement, let's say, where you end it. But of course, I mean, this is very dependent on the specific approach that has been taken, understanding how activities or how sectors are defined, and the level of granularity comes afterwards. So,
yeah, thanks. I think there's also a direction towards not just listing what is green, but also listing what is brown, right? And I think that will also set the context differently. And I think this will segue nicely to our next question on the categorization, the so-called decision tree that the SC has put in the taxonomy at page 12 and 13. So if we move on to the next topic here, there's a decision tree. Maybe here you can flash that if you have. Yeah, so it is a simple decision tree. But again, it may not cover every single dimension, right? Because it's made to be seen as parsimonious, right? So to help decision making at a higher level. Is there any suggestion that we can get from maybe Chi-san, you can jump in here on how can we enhance this classification, and also how can this be harmonized with other framework? Do you see other framework having such decision tree and in terms of interoperability? Jason?
You asked me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That is a little bit difficult to answer directly only about this the decision tree. Can I say something about my opinion about this taxonomy itself? I think as Daniel and Singing said, this Malaysian SRI taxonomy is very principle-based taxonomy. So usually I like principle-based standards, but as other people said, regarding taxonomy, it is difficult to share what we should do for example, this Malaysian taxonomy, I think it's aiming to the transitions. So if you are more focusing on the company behavior, maybe this decision tree is okay. But if investor side wanted to know which company business can contribute on transitions, maybe this is a little bit difficult to understand, only this the decision tree. So because maybe I cannot understand what's AMBA mean. If you can provide some more example, maybe that is helpful. But this is a little bit difficult to what is AMBA. So that I don't know this decision tree can work or not. But I think it seems okay, because this decision tree itself is very simple. So if you can have a additional supplemental criteria for each categories, or for each industry level as singing says similar things, maybe it's very helpful, so that we can understand which which business can contribute for this the transition or not. So maybe in that case, if my understanding correct, if AMBA, a company can say anything. For example, that I can contribute in the future, so maybe I can belong to be this AMBA. So in that case, it's, I don't know what your what this taxonomy wants to, for investors, but what the investor wants to do is we want something that can help for investor decision making, which business or company should be invested. So maybe there's some more. So that's somewhere, if you are providing some more the supplemental document for with some technological, the scientific perspective, that's maybe it will work. So our decision tree itself is maybe fine, if I can answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chisan. Yeah, sorry for the color coding here. The amber suddenly become green. It's springtime, maybe. Yeah. But apart from that cosmetic thing, I think I see your point. I think the definition of amber might need to be elaborated, taking into account that it might overlap with transition, and transition needs to be much more. It's a bit tricky, right? It's a gray area. Need to have some time frame. What are the alternative and the so-called KPIs as be set for such activity to be considered as transitional and therefore migrate towards green. Right?
It's some kind of the status, or maybe more I think more essential thing is AMBA is some kind of status when the company is going to somehow more good status. I mean, currently company is providing some the little bit brown product, but this company wants to be more change their product more greener. In that case, AMBA is some kind of status between both of them. That is a little bit difficult for understanding investor side.
All right. Thank you, Christina. We know that observation. Thank you. Brian, so you provide advisory service to clients, right? So how would you advise client in using this particular assessment framework?
Yeah, I think because the purpose of the taxonomy is for companies to follow the defined standards or thresholds. So it is also based on the targets on a scientific basis. So it is a really good reference for issuers on how to look at those different requirements or standards and integrate them into existing management and business. But for example, like how to integrate requirements, potential harms as risk to the company's enterprise risk management. But more importantly, because I believe no matter from the expectation from different stakeholders, including the investors or future regulators, disclosure is one of the really essential part for that. So how to make sure that the information are accurate and precise for public disclosures. I believe that in terms of internal assurance and also external assurance on such information that is required can play a role on that. And of course, if necessary, an independent party can be involved in assess or to verify the entity's assessment result as well. But more importantly, how to make sure that regular monitoring is in place in order to ensure that there's a continuous improvement, especially in terms of when we talk about the transition phase.
Yeah. So maybe having a common template or common kind of framework that eased different party use cases, right? So you have the financial institution using a common so-called framework or template, and this would be can also be used by auditors and insurance providers as well as for monitoring purpose. I think that's very useful. On this point, this one appears, this decision tree appears to be looking into environmental context. So Daniel, we do note that there was a social taxonomy framework or paper that was issued by the EU recently. Do you think this kind of classification system as shown in the screen is applicable to the social component?
Well, just, I mean, to clarify as well, I mean, the paper that was published, I believe, is the report from the EU platform, that is the advisory body that actually, let's say, advises the European Commission on the expansion of the EU taxonomy. And I mean, I think there are some differences between the two types of taxonomy, because an environmental taxonomy generally, you know, as I said before, normally is trying to reduce negative impacts of the environment. But economic activities in general, like due to employment, for example, like a negative economic activity in terms of environmental impact could have a positive social impact because it's employing people and it has, let's say, a good track record of an employer. You know, you can be a coal extracting company or a coal burning company, but you have great social package and benefits for your employees. So let's say that's their difference there. And also the foundations are different, and to define, let's say, quantifiable criteria based on science may not be so possible as for, let's say, an environmental taxonomy. But what I think is like an let's say yellow, green, red scheme for a social, let's say, impact, I don't think at some point may be so feasible, especially when we're talking about human rights violations or things like this. I mean, because it's not that either you do a bit of human rights violations, either you do them or you don't. So in that regard, it is critical to say, well, this is more about remediating the problem and saying, okay, either you do it well and you provide social benefits, or you don't, and you need to assess it either through the value chain, your specific engagement with customers, or with your own employees. So I think that's the most critical part, but it is very good that it's already included within the SRI taxonomy, a social component that should be analyzed. But please bear in mind all of these considerations.
Sure, thank you. We will have a question on social aspect later, which we can delve in further. So in the interest of time, maybe we can move to the second topic. I think a lot of emerging markets now are talking about credible transition, not just transition, but transition that is credible. Maybe Sini, you can jump in here. In the previous chart that we see the decision tree, there's a word called remedial efforts. So what are the criteria that would constitute a remedial effort to support transition? If you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I think for this particular question, I do want to differentiate, because within the taxonomy, remedial efforts were not specific to only the carbon transition, right? So there were, you know, if you are contravening any of the other environmental objectives, you also need to put in remedial efforts, right? So I think what's important to identify here is some of the principles around the remedial effort. And I think the section on credible transition has some of that principles that I think should be applied across the board to other parts or other types of remedial efforts. So for example, you know, to ensure that the remedial efforts are robust and science-based, I think it's a very, very strong foundation, and it really needs to be regarded as one of the high-level principles, right? And then using that as a basis to look at the other remedial efforts when it comes to biodiversity, when it comes to, pursuing circular economy, which are the other parts of the environmental objectives. So for example, on the biodiversity side, we can take some guidance from other related disclosures or principles in TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Based Financial Disclosures, for example, or some of the very well-developed deforestation, peatland protection mechanisms, biodiversity mechanisms that are already in existence today, right? So just to take a leaf from the credible transition piece and say that the robustness and the science-basedness should be the basis of the remedial efforts. But I think the other thing that could be a little bit confusing here is the idea of whether or not this remedial efforts are focused on company level or project level, project asset level. I think increasingly for investors, that you can be, even if you ring fence a project, let's say if it's a renewable energy project, but it's the larger company does not yet have a credible transition pathway, it's increasingly more and more difficult for investors to be able to support that type of transactions, right? So I think it is quite important here also to kind of identify what are the relationships between a remedial effort action that is, on the project level, or remedial actions that relate to having the company have a strong transition pathway forward. So those are the two things that come to my mind.
Thanks for asking. Chistan, you have some views, I think you experienced in working with Japanese external review view on a transition bond. Did you mind sharing some thoughts on this and how it's tied back to this topic of credible transition?
Yeah, I think that this proposed taxonomy is, based on our experience, I think it is very helpful, especially chapter 4 is mentioning about the appointed external reviewer, review providers. And not only that, also, I think I like this chapter 4 actually, but I can introduce one of the Japanese external review providers supported to issue transition bond before, as Adam said. The company which issued transition bond provides gas and they wanted to repair the pipeline. So they chose the transition bond, not the normal finance, because they repair it. But they want to have a plan to provide hydrogen in future instead of gas. So using the same pipeline. So it means they choose material and functions to make this pipeline, new pipeline, possible to use both. Maybe it will be a little bit costly, I think. But the Japanese review provider gives a guarantee to investor whether this company really on the way to switching to the hydrogen or not. So this finance also encourage this company itself to go to the reduce emissions, and also investor side can contribute to it. So I think it is transition. So that when I'm thinking about this experience, this chapter 4 is very much helpful.
Thanks. I mean, if we have more time, we would love to delve in deeper into the case study. But if anyone has any question, please feel free to raise that in the Q&A function, and then hopefully we can answer that towards the end. I will just quickly touch on this science-based target, the next topic on transition. I think this has been also mentioned, the SRI taxonomy is very good to see, especially from a advocacy standpoint. We know that it is quite a challenge for corporate and fund manager to subscribe to science-based target. But I think this is crucial because it sets the foundation for a robust and credible transition strategy. Right? So maybe Danny, you can come in here and share some of the thoughts on this. How would science-based help to promoting transparency in terms of the KPIs? How can KPIs be linked to SBTI? And how can this be done in a more practical way on the ground?
Okay, so yes, I mean, I think that's a critical element, and given that I've been saying as well that science-based elements are critical for the definition of taxonomy, I think it's also very important to have them related to the transition plans, no? To understand what are the transition strategies and provide proper guidance on how to do this. So I think it depends on the approach. If you're having a sectoral approach on science-based, you may use international, let's say, scenarios. You can go with the IPCC, or you can go with the International Energy Agency, or it depends on the scenario that matches both the NDCs of the country and that matches, let's say, the overall expectations of the planet, if I may. With regards to what makes a transition plan science-based, well, not science-based because that should be based on science, but what makes it credible is that the company and the starting point and the speed and the objectives should include relevant data, maybe taxonomy data based on the activities. As we said before, you may have a company active in a sector, but having different activities, and the different activities may be performing at different levels. So you need to understand that. You need to have forward-looking predictions of where the company investments and the activities are going to go and going to move, as well as understanding where the assets are located, because you will need as well to identify risks. So here it would be, let's say, a consideration between the two elements, information on the company and the resources, etc., and ensure that the plan is credible, that you have something there that is going to be feasible to undertake with the financing that you're going to provide. And I think that is going to be critical for the financial institutions. I will stop there, but in general terms, I think those are the key aspects that should be considered. And if you can generate KPIs as well at the activity level, it's just an extra level of granularity that I think investors would really appreciate.
No, thanks, Daniel. Chitan, I think you have some thoughts also on this KPI from a science-based perspective.
I think that what Daniel said is everything, and I don't need to repeat what Daniel already explained well. But I think still for transitions, it is. I think the company and investor need more information. I would like to introduce one case. It's Japanese government agency. One of the Japanese government agencies started to provide a roadmap for each industry how to achieve the decrease emissions. For example, if you are the construction company, when you plan to your own step toward to net zero, for example, some other transition strategy, but maybe you need to know that schedule the cement industry technical achievement. So that industrial progress is different in each country. So if you provide, if you mean that Malaysian society provide an industrial roadmap that is maybe helpful for investors, especially global investors. I think it is similar to EU taxonomy. Taxonomy also including a lot of technical and scientific information. So, but it also doesn't including some kind of the progress. So how to go to for example, when cement industry can provide more greener cement. So the similar, but it's a little bit different. So this is my idea from my experience.
Yeah, thanks. We have about 15 minutes left. So far, there's no question from the audience. So, and I have the liberty to ask more questions, and hopefully we can end soon so that you can go back to work. Since there's still a working day. The topic on just transition is very important, especially from an emerging market standpoint. The SRI has alluded to this concept. So maybe you can share some thoughts on how can just transition be improvised further in terms of the content and the alignment to the International Labour Organization.
Great, yeah, thank you. I think definitely have to agree that the context of transition and what that means on a social economic holistic perspective should be very important and is very important to the international investors and also the financiers and the banking industry. I think typically what we see is that the social safeguards are part of a standard set of do no significant harm. I think here in the SRI taxonomy we see the social do no significant harm a little bit separate from the environment do no significant harm, right? But there is one section in 4.6 where, as part of this transition planning, there is an indication there that companies need to be thinking about the just transition. And I think that framing is important, that framing which is that the justness comes as part of the transition, right? That not just the workers, and I think one of the things here is that there's a lot of focus on workers, but there's suppliers, the supply chain of this transition of high carbon industries also need to be thought about. So the workers and the supplier safeguards need to be built in as part of the supporting this credible transition. I think I wanted to point out, I think IRO is a good reference point. OECD also is a good reference point. Another reference point that I've seen is on the World Bank Benchmarking Alliance. Also, they have their own guidance for companies in terms of what to think about for just transition. Among all of these, I think one of the key thing that is consistent throughout all of them is this social dialogue piece, right? That this sustainable transition, there will be a lot of challenges, and the foundation of it is ensuring that there's this evidence or this process of a social dialogue. While this can be at national level, it also can be at industry level and can also be at the company level, right? So demonstrating that that has happened is a part of the just transition process. Given the amount of time, I don't want to talk too much about the national level, which it will be very helpful should there be a common view of what the job transition could look like, what the reskilling options could look like. But I do want to point out that, let's say if we look at the World Benchmarking Alliance's indicator list, that's more directly applicable to businesses and investors. And in there, we do see that they identify the impact to business relationships, right? Which is what I was talking about just now, the supply chain. So not just focusing on the workers, but also focusing on the supply chain and where that intersection with your emissions reduction goals has to be as part of understanding how you can support the supply chain to move along with you as well, right? So I think those would be things that I would hope to see as the taxonomy develops further on the just transition.
Thank you. Brian, from a consulting point of view, how would you support this transition of a just transition at the corporate level? How would you advise corporate company to balance that? On one hand, you need to strive towards the environmental agenda, and then on the other hand, you also need to ensure that just transition is being considered.
Yeah, I also want to echo Cindy's point. It's not. I mean, of course, we are talking about environment, but essentially it has impact on people's livelihood, health, overall quality of life. So I believe the concept of just transition is really important, and it is also something that is not really on the agenda yet. From my personal opinion. So how we can address this kind of issue will require something on prevention, mitigation, elimination by the public sector in order to achieve net zero, in the ways that are also consistent with the international human rights and labor standards. And I believe that, I mean, in terms of looking at the IL guideline, is a good start. But from my perspective, I believe that it's it's not only limited to labor, as mentioned by Cindy, the supply chain, but also the broader society as well, household communities, and particularly those facing poverty or those who are vulnerable to immediate climate threats. So I believe that for companies, they need to think about this topic more widely. I mean, how, for example, if they look to how to achieve this type, how to achieve the net zero thing, how they can be integrated into different parts of their business, but also talking to the different stakeholders, I mean, a wider stakeholder to prevent any negative impact on their stakeholders, and how to balance that to achieve more feasible and practical way for doing so. I believe this is something that we need to look at.
Yeah, and there's also this can pave the way for more like just transition financial instrument as well, right? So I think we're also seeing that some of the region and funds, there are just transition funds that are being set up to address this complex issue as well. We will just go to the final question, and with more time, maybe we can wrap up. Seeing can also wrap up towards the end. So Brian, just to touch on your point on this just transition. So as you know, the SR taxonomy also have a a key social objective, which is on enhanced conduct towards stakeholder. So how would a company conduct social due diligence? How do you measure and assess the cross value chain, and how do you measure in terms of the scale, the duration, scope of this positive social outcomes?
Yeah. To be very frank, the social part is always a challenging part, because somehow we need to have a kind of agreement or consensus among stakeholders what kind of impact that we are wanting to bring. And it is not so direct. Somehow you need to really define what it means. But so this is somehow is so called the quite difficult to quantify. But somehow if we talk about, so you mentioned about the scale, depth, or duration is something what we call the 3 dimensions of the impact. For example, scale, we talk about the number of people experiencing outcome. The depth will be something like the degree of change experienced by stakeholders. And duration, the time period for stakeholder to experience the outcome. So I mean, we need to look at that and see what in each type of the projects, how this 3 dimensions should be included in the impact measurements, or how the company should look at those impacts. But of course, I think it will be also good to, as mentioned earlier, for the companies to engage, to talk to their stakeholders, but to align the expectations and respond to those expectations, which this any projects that they are ongoing can bring this kind of positive outcomes, and do the record, do the monitoring, and try to demonstrate the impact through a more quantifiable way. So I think this is a thing that the companies can do in order to look at their operation and also across the value chain.
Yeah. There's also a number of tools and methodology out there that fund managers and corporates can also adopt. But I think apart from those tools, I think more important is the implementation, to ensure that the quality of the engagement as well as the measurement is of high standard. So I think maybe we can, we still have a bit of time. Unfortunately, I think there's no question yet from the audience. Maybe they might provide that after this session. Maybe I can just wrap up with Xingye's point on from a disclosure standpoint, right, on the next topic. This is the final topic before we go on to the poll question. So how would taxonomy be aligned to corporate and financial institutions disclosure? So you can see that there are TTFD, the SASB, GRI framework, right? And how can these be interlinked, and how would one contribute to the other? You can just wrap up on this point.
I think so for this particular, the link to disclosure, so it's a massive thunderstorm going on if you happen to hear that. I think right now the SRI taxonomy is voluntary, right? I think there are some processes or some forces that can still assist in improvements of disclosure despite the fact it's voluntary. So for example, there will be first movers who are assessing financing because of the SRI taxonomy, and as they match how international investors want to see sustainable investments, that usually also matches with how international investors' expectation for more robust reporting, right? So there is an indirect impact, but I think for more direct impact that we want to see improved disclosures that can also then feed back into the system of determining how you can look at sustainable economic activity. So it's a two-way street, right? The disclosure helps with understanding how effective the taxonomy, and the taxonomy helps to drive disclosure. There needs to be some kind of a play across all the different participants in the regulatory sector to ensure that that is happening. I think that very early, right at the beginning, when Daniel was sharing about some of the key building blocks, the verification processes and assurance requirements, very important in this process. And I think that our experience, in South Africa is all the regulatory players need to come together and try to figure out how to push this forward together.
Thanks, Xingye. Oh, we have one question. So before we address that question, we can also open the poll questions. There are only 3 poll questions. So what, maybe Caroline, you can show that first in the screen, so that while people take time to fill up, Singing can take time also to respond to that question that's posed to you. All right. Singing, can you see the question? Yeah, there's one question on the company versus project, right? And I think it refers to the granularity of economic activity and the categorization of it too prescriptive. So I'll give you some time to go through it, and let me just run through the poll question that we have now. So how would capital markets use the SRI? This was the earlier one. Oh, sorry. Okay, so now we have the new chat. So what challenges will your institution face in implementing the SRI taxonomy? So this is still work in progress in terms of people filling up. So while we wait for you all to fill up, I think you can easily go through the 3 questions. Just press next, submit answer, then you can go to the next question. So while we wait for the audience to fill up, maybe Sing, you would like to share some thoughts on all the questions.
Yeah, I can share my thoughts, but I also invite other panelists to share theirs. I think my comment there in terms of company versus project was that then there needs to be some clarity on how the transition requirements are applied. Not so much that there is definitely a need for the economic activity to get to a much more granular level. But I think one of the things that struck me as I was taking a look and digesting how the SRI taxonomy might work is whether or not the amber, and I think other panelists have mentioned just now, whether or not the amber category now has too many different definitions of amber. Right? So I don't think it's really necessarily about the granularity of economic activity types, but whether or not within each definition there is clarity on why they fell in there. Then my comment on whether or not a credible transition requirement needs to be applied only at the project level or at the company level, or how we see that interaction between the two, I think that can be looked at separately to whether or not the economic activities need to be more granular than they are now. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think we have about a minute plus left. Maybe I can go to the poll question, the results. Okay, so which elements of the taxonomy will be most useful to the institution? The highest being quantitative threshold. So this is something that is expected to be useful because it helps what can be measured, can be managed, right? But having said that, I think qualitative screening criteria is also equally important. It's 53%. Having sectorial specific guidelines is also very important. So I think these top 3 will be the key takeaways for the further refinement of the taxonomy and the future guidances. We move on to the second question. Do you foresee any gaps between your current capabilities with the requirements and guidance of the SRI taxonomy? Understandably, because it's still a new taxonomy, and we are seeing that there is a significant gap. Majority of respondents indicated there is a significant gap that requires a lot of major overhaul or investment into the processes. Hopefully, this will not be too costly, balancing between the risk and opportunity. All right, if you go to the last question, what challenges does your institution face in implementing the taxonomy? The top 3 would be lack of internal skill set, capability or capacity and system, harmonizing internal taxonomy with the SRI taxonomy. So I think that this is very important. And also lack of data availability. I think that cut across. Cut across. I think it's interesting to see these 3. The lack of quantitative assessment is not as high as the others. Yeah, so if you can, these are key takeaways from the audience. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. So with this, I will end with a big thank you to all the participants as well as our esteemed panelists. It's been really delightful session with all of you. And so I apologize for passing the 2:30 mark, 1 or 2 minutes. I'll pass this to Caroline. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Adam, and thanks to the panelists for the very constructive conversation in the past 1.5 hours. And to all those on the call, we hope that gave you a very good understanding and perspective about taxonomy, and also the sharing by Puan Salma earlier on the idea and the motivation behind issuing the consultative paper on the SRI taxonomy. So we have come to an end. To CFA Society Malaysia's member, please note that we are still inviting feedback from members on the consultative paper. So you would have received the email. The deadline will be 16th of March, this Wednesday, for us to process and digest all the feedback together with today's conversation and feedback from the poll. So thank you very much, everyone. The recording of today's session will be made available on our YouTube. So please give us a week or two until we clean up, and then we'll post everything up on our platforms. Thanks, Securities Commission Malaysia. Thank you, World Bank Group, Dr. Adam and the panelists. Hope you all have a good day ahead and also a good week ahead. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.